Pokemon Centers, one of the greatest mysteries that exist within the Pokemon world. They have existed since the very beginning and have provided free healing to our Pokemon at every corner. It doesn't matter if our Pokemon have been burned, frozen, poisoned, paralyzed, or even fainted in the midst of battle. They will come back, fully healed, as though nothing had ever happened to them. But there's a massive problem with this. Where does the money come from? How are any of these Poke Centers running? What is secretly happening behind the scenes? What is the secret cost of it all? And could this lead to a world where viruses could become superpowered and leave the world in ruin? I've decided to dig deeper into the rabbit hole that is the Pokemon world's Poke Centers and discover their sinister hidden costs. Howdy there, I'm Krillik, and we're going to be breaking this video down into a number of sections to help explain what is even going on with Poke Centers and the world of Pokemon. It is genuinely a mess, and something that as I dug deeper started to bother me more and more and more until I couldn't stand it anymore and I had to make this video. As usual though, I will say the basis for a lot of my information is coming through the assistance and credits of Bulbapedia. Thank you so much, and they had their 20th anniversary recently, which is crazy to me. Now, we're going to start with the general history and description, move on to the cost of treating many of these conditions, and even damage consistently done to Pokemon and how that is treated through real-life comparisons. Discuss where that money could be coming from, what the cost of it all is, and finally, what problem Poke Centers might actually be creating. A problem that could turn the entire Pokemon world upside down on its head and cause it to collapse at any second. So let's get started. Do you even know what a Poke Center actually is? If you do, fantastic. If not, we're still going to talk about it in depth. A Pokemon Center, also shortened by HOW of Pokemon Sun and Moon to PMC, is an establishment that provides regulatory services for Pokemon trainers, such as healing their Pokemon for free. Really living in the future here, getting free healthcare. In their early concept, they weren't even actual Pokemon Centers. They were in fact inns and hotels that provided healing devices in the personal rooms. This was what they originally were before even Generation 1 came out within Council Monsters, which was the early design concept of the Pokemon games that was proposed as early as 1990. Within the modern core games, they've been around and gone through a lot of changes, and we're not going to necessarily go through all those changes in detail, we're going to summarize it. Pokemon Centers are found in most towns and cities of the Pokemon world, sometimes even on routes, with almost every major settlement having at least one Pokemon Center. They take the form of buildings in most regions, but Paldea and Kitakami's Pokemon Centers are outdoors instead. Some Pokemon Centers can be found outside of towns. Pokemon Centers are built where many trainers gather. This is to accommodate those trainers in need and to serve as a resting spot. That goes for both Pokemon and trainers, which is an important thing to remember. The most common service the Pokemon Center offers is healing Pokemon free of charge. In the games, Pokemon Centers vary between regions, but all of them have in common a healing station run by a Pokemon Center lady behind a main counter that is not Nurse Joy, which is a partial sin, but whatever, which heals all party Pokemon free of charge. It just keeps coming back free of charge. It is very specified as free of charge. Starting in Generation 8, this also heals all Pokemon in the player's boxes, whereas they would be automatically healed upon being deposited in the boxes in prior generations. So what you're telling me is because I sent them to the Pokemon Center, just because of that, it actually doesn't mean that they're being healed or properly taken care of immediately anymore. Now, that is a little bit incredibly shocking, although that is likely just a game balance, considering the fact that you can access your PC or your Pokemon boxes at any time, anywhere within Generation 9. Prior to Generation 9, Pokemon Centers also always featured a PC, or Rotami in Galar, that weird little thing that didn't make it very far, to access the Pokemon storage system, among other functionality. Most Pokemon Centers also contain various NPCs that vary between locations. In Unova, Kalos, Alola, Galar, and Paldea, Pokemarts are also housed inside of the Pokemon Centers, one of the best decisions they ever made, honestly. Prior to Generation 6, and in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Pokemon Centers also have services for connecting with other players and trading and battling with them. This required wired connections prior to Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. I remember spending a lot of time walking up in the OG Diamond and Pearl. Walking up, going into those rooms, and knowing nothing about how that's supposed to work because I did not have people to play those Pokemon games with in the past. In addition, Alola's Pokemon Centers house the Pokemon Center Cafe, one of the best things that ever existed in all of Pokemon, a cafe to drink coffee and tea and everything else, while you wait for your Pokemon to get healed, and then they give you free beans to make your Pokemon love you more, it was great, fantastic, it's the perfect little thing, and now it's gone, unfortunately. Galar's house, Jack, was also a part of this, and Paldea's and Kitakami's house, the TM Machine and Union Circle. From Generation 5 to 7, the deliverers of mystery gifts appear in Pokemon Centers. Mr. Metal also appears in Pokemon Black 2, White 2 when awarding the player any medal. But how about we look at the anime for more of our answers? Pokemon Centers in Pokemon the series are headed by a Nurse Joy. Celebrate, baby! The healing process takes place in real time, unlike in the games. So Ash and his friends often have to wait until their Pokemon are fully healed. All Pokemon Centers are connected, and in times of crisis, all Pokemon can be transferred from one to another, as seen in Pokemon Emergencies. So yes, that is shown early on in the anime where they're able to just place a Pokeball, and then it just goes through and gets digitized, basically, and sent out to a whole other Pokemon Center. We're not talking like mailing system, you put it in like you're going to the bank and it just and it goes. No, it is full on, we are in the future, baby. Pokemon Centers are considered an important service, as so shown in Celebi and Joy, where in the past, the residents of Mariantown built a Pokemon Center as a community project. So there is the possibility that Pokemon Centers are built and maintained by a community if they can acquire the funds. But there's still so many more questions that we will come to later and explain. Pokemon Centers are designed for trainers so they can rest between activities. Trainers use Pokemon Centers as gathering places so they can share information about Pokemon. They also have access to video phones, PCs, trade machines, and most offer free food and lodging. I will also note, once again, early on in the anime, I distinctly remember Ash walking behind the front desk of the Poke Center, where the nurses would bring you in and talk to you and everything and then take your Pokemon away. I'm pretty sure he probably committed a HIPAA violation. I'm just saying. Ash might be a criminal. Actually, is there a video that I could do that explains all the different things that Ash does that make him a war criminal at all? That'd be ridiculous, and that'd be a fun, stupid little video to do. As a Pokemon journey can take a very long time, Pokemon Centers can also be used as mailing destinations. In addition, a trainer can arrange for their loved ones to send them packages, typically to the next Pokemon Center that they are traveling to. Inside a typical Pokemon Center, one can find a front desk, a lobby, sometimes with vending machines, a Pokeball room, an emergency room with plenty of beds for injured Pokemon, but not people, a recovery room, a waiting room, rooms for lodging, and a cafeteria. A lobby may also have a large widescreen TV or several smaller TVs so trainers can watch typically Pokemon-oriented shows such as Sinnoh Now, Pokemon Contest broadcasts, and major competitions like the Pokemon League Conference and the Grand Festival of each region. A typical sleeping room has a desk and a chair and 2 sets of bunk beds to maximize space, and girls do not have to sleep in separate rooms from the boys. That is not something that I expected to read. I'm interesting. At least one Pokemon Center was shown in Uncrushing Defeat to have a small library with a PC presumably connected to some network akin to the internet, as an information room. It is unknown how these activities performed by a Pokemon Center are financed. Boom! I love getting that confirmation of nobody knows. I love seeing that it's like we read all this direct information and yet nobody knows. Nobody understands where this information, where this money is coming from. Now, on the outside, they come in all shapes and sizes, but usually have a rather large letter P somewhere, and battlefields where trainers can practice. Yeah, go outside, go damage your Pokemon, then come back in, we'll heal them for free, don't worry about it. It's free, baby. You might as well take advantage of it. As shown in The Ghost of Maiden's Peak, Pokemon Centers have a curfew for their residing trainers. At 11 p.m., A metal screen is lowered down in front of the Pokemon Center's doorway, preventing trainers from entering or leaving the Pokemon Center after curfew. That's really interesting to me. So no matter what, there's an actual curfew in place. When you think about it that way, this means that our individuals running the Pokemon Centers are in some capacity working their 9 to 5 jobs at a Poké Center. They are either hourly or salaried individuals. They probably have, they're either CNA type levels, or they are have actual doctorates and stuff like that. These little details show us a lot more. Tell us that they're not just robots running this center. Nurse Joy isn't secretly a cyborg, because there's a lot of different theories and ideas that can go into this that we have to push away. In Restore and Renew and Under Color of Darkness, Ash and Go are seen wearing pajamas provided by the Pokemon Center, so there's even more services there. The resident Nurse Joy of the center is usually assisted by a certain type of Pokemon, usually one or various Chansey in the Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, and the Orange Islands areas, Audino in Unova, and the Decolor Islands, and then Wigglytuff and Kalos, and then finally Blissey and Comfey in Alola. There are some exceptions in certain Pokemon Centers regardless of region, however. For example, the Nurse Joy of Johto's Ice Path was assisted by a Jinx. So when we look at all of those Pokemon, none of them have a sinister background to them. They all have a more healing or fairy-like capacity associated with them. Even going off the top of my head, of course everyone knows Blissey. It actively gives people or Pokemon eggs to help them with their nutrition. When we look at Wigglytuff, it would be able to actually put Pokemon or people to sleep. When we look at, let's say, Comfey, it is going to be able to revitalize other people's nutrients as well, or provide any sort of minor healing. Jinx is such an oddball. And then Audino is the Doctor Pokemon. I mean, even if you look at its Mega form, it has decided, I don't want to fight. I want to use that energy to instead create love and healing. What's also interesting is that we have had an instance I've brought up many times before in other videos regarding our Olivine Lighthouse Ampharos, which had to be treated through herbal care rather than a Pokemon Center, despite there being one in the immediacy. The Ampharos was legitimately sick and needed a different form of treatment. This means that whatever the Pokemon Center is providing can't actually heal everything. There are going to be forms of viruses or bacteria or anything else that may exist on or within a Pokemon's body that could go untreated without proper medical care. We could look at a number of different people within the Pokemon world, such as the Pokemon Watchers, who are able to assess a Pokemon depending upon how they use their moves. Because yes, that's what they do. If, let's say, a Pokemon uses Flamethrower one day and then uses it on the second day, if it is weaker the second day, like let's say it doesn't have the same heat intensity, it doesn't have the same color, something along those lines, then the Pokemon Watcher is skilled enough, assumedly, to actually be able to analyze that and say, oh, yeah, there might be something wrong with the Pokemon's fire organ, or maybe it's tired, maybe it didn't get enough sleep, maybe there's not enough nutrients, maybe it needs to eat charcoal, I don't know. I don't have fire Pokemon in real life, so I don't know how to deal with those symptoms in the slightest. I'm not a doctor even to begin with, so who would have guessed? Now, before we get into the cost of treatment for the different conditions within the Pokemon world, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this so far, please make sure that you subscribe, share this with others, and if you'd like to help a small channel out, considering ad revenue is inconsistent, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It makes a huge difference and ensures that I can continue to do deep research, releasing plenty of videos without having to slow down and pick up, another job, because let's be real, your boy has to pay bills. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and back to the video. Oh yes, my favorite thing, bringing the real world into the world of Pokemon. What I didn't expect is that I would be talking about the medical world within Pokemon anytime soon. So this is gonna be interesting and a little bit difficult. So what we need to do in order to keep the life of Pokemon within our analysis and add that realism is that we need to just break everything down into the different conditions that are major conditions within Pokemon and the cost of treatment. An important thing to note is that many of our potions, healing items, and even the Pokemon centers themselves may only be partial substitutes when real rest is encouraged in the Pokemon world, as we see within the Pokemon Adventures manga. That once again puts a stronger emphasis on you can't just have your Pokemon fight. You know, maybe it's a Machop doing a bunch of construction. Maybe it is a Pokemon that is in a lot of battles. Maybe it is a Pokemon that is in constant contests. Whatever it is, you can't just fully exhaust your Pokemon, then have them go to a Pokemon Center and think that everything's going to be okay. Not only will that not actually fully rejuvenate them, despite what it does in the games, it will actually cause the Pokemon to dislike you an incredible amount. All work and no play. Status conditions, also referred to as status problems or status ailments, affect a Pokemon's ability to battle. There are two kinds of status conditions: non-volatile, which last until the Pokemon is healed, and volatile, which lasts until the Pokemon is taken out of battle. Having Pokerus and being fainted are displayed identically to non-volatile status conditions, but are not officially considered as such. A non-volatile status condition is a status condition that remains after being switched out. It's displayed in the party screen and the Pokemon's summary. They can be cured by healing at a Pokemon Center, specific curative items, or other ways, which I guess is just herbs or whatever old lady decides that, okay, Gary, you can sleep in my bed. I'll just watch you very creepily. If a Pokemon is affected by a non-volatile status condition, an icon will display the type of status condition. This can be broken down to the conditions that I'm sure many of you know and love, that's a strong word, of burn, freeze, paralysis, poison, and sleep. For the sake of this video and our focus, we are not discussing the volatile status conditions, as they don't require medical assistance in order to be cured. And we're going to start with the burn condition. The burn condition inflicts damage every turn and halves damage dealt by a Pokemon's physical moves, except Pokemon with the Guts ability and Facade from Generation 6 onward, almost at 5. Currently, it inflicts 1/8 of the maximum HP of the Pokemon burned every turn. Considering that the Pokemon can literally be shown to be on fire when they're burned, if we consider the anime, and even if we don't consider the anime, we can see that the damage is done after our Pokemon acts, meaning that it hurts the Pokemon to move. If we take that and transfer that into consideration with real life burns and how the Pokemon react and are healed, the most fitting would likely actually be second degree burns for our Pokemon. It damages both the epidermis and part of the underlying layer, the dermis. They appear red, swollen, and blistered, and as we can see in some games, our Pokemon do turn red when they are burned, and then it may take 7 to 21 days to heal. That's just obviously the real life comparison. Meanwhile, higher degrees of burn end up affecting muscle and fat, may require skin grafts, and then with a 4th degree, it may go as far as to affect the bone itself. As such, those don't make sense to be a part of our analysis here, and it feels most fitting that the burns are only a 2nd degree, despite the very cartoonish effect we see where someone is completely charred after being hit by a fire-type move. Looking at information from the National Institute of Health regarding cost analysis of acute burn patients, which basically is just treatment of major burns from the moment it was received to the end of treatment, we have the following. Even if calculating the exact cost of burn treatment is a very hard task, the study of cost analysis provides financial perspective. We performed a cost analysis study in our burn center to respond to questions about total patient treatment cost and the length of hospital stay. 43 patients with major burns were identified on the basis of the study criteria. The data regarding total treatment cost and the length of hospital stay for each type of burn, flame, scald, or electric, were collected at the end of this study. The average total body surface area burned was 36, give or take 7% of their body. The average duration of hospital stay was 73 days, give or take 33 days. And patients with electrical burns stayed longer in hospitals than patients with other types of burn injuries. Each 1% of burn corresponded to a mean hospital stay of 2 days. The mean overall total cost was $15,250 US. $15,250 for these burns that were only between 29 and 43% of their body. Meanwhile, our Pokemon are getting full body burns. There is a significant difference, but that gives us a strong baseline. I also want you to imagine the number of times that you get these burns healed within the game of Pokemon. How many trainers arrive for that healing throughout the day? Sure, a burn heal itself is said to only cost 200 to 300 credits, Pokédollars, whatever you want to call it, but that is just for game balance purposes and doesn't take into account the possibility of it being a full body burn or of it being a deeper burn, because those are sprays within the Pokemon world. Those aren't like full-on treatments. You can't treat something that is dead. If it has dead skin from being burned, you can't treat it. You have to basically remove it. Now, I'm not going to repeat that and the cost of all of the little items that we buy within the game for every little thing, but I want you to keep in mind the sheer number of patients that will come through that door of a Pokemon Center and the sheer gravity of the damage that is being done to a Pokemon that has to be healed. And take that into account, what the costs could be. Onto the freeze status condition. The freeze condition causes a Pokemon to be unable to use moves. From Generation 2 onward, the frozen Pokemon has a chance to be thawed each turn. 10% in Generation 2 or 20% in Generation 3 onwards. Possibly even thawing right after being frozen. However, in Generation 1, a frozen Pokemon never thaws without external aid. Pokemon cannot be frozen in harsh sunlight. Imagine just leaving your Pokemon frozen forever because of the status condition and you can't afford anything. Oh, bless. Luckily, we have Pokemon Centers to resolve that problem for us. Now, Frostbite is a status condition exclusive to Pokemon Legends Arceus, replacing the freeze condition. Bless, honestly, it was such a good status condition, and they need to bring it back. I don't know a single person that doesn't say that. If you disagree with me, please tell me why, because I think Frostbite is so much more interesting. Yes, it causes damage, but I just feel like it's, again, a little bit more interesting than just the full-on, haha, you can't move, you're frozen now. Similar to a burn, Frostbite inflicts damage equal to 1/16 of the target's maximum HP every turn, and it reduces damage dealt by its special moves during this time. When it is snowing, moves that may inflict Frostbite are more likely to do so. Similar to Freeze, Frostbite will also revert a Sky-formed Shaman to its land form. Ice-type Pokemon cannot get Frostbite. So considering that we have Frostbite to work with, and how a full-body freeze would, typically kill someone and can't be properly analyzed, unless we want to look at the cost of a funeral, let's look at Frostbite treatment cost studies. Frostbite is a condition that occurs, if you didn't know, when the tissues within someone's body freeze due to prolonged exposure to cold temperatures. This also doesn't necessarily have to be flat out, it's like sub-zero temperatures. It could go as far as, there's a very cold wind that's bringing that in, and it already is cold outside. There's a lot of different factors that can go into it. Though, once again, from the National Institute of Health, NIH, we have numerous demographic, socioeconomic, and injury factors influence a burn patient's hospital course. Compared to the typical burn patient, Frostbite injury frequently impacts those with high rates of mental illness, substance abuse, and those suffering from homelessness. Hospital length of stay was significantly longer in Frostbite patients, 8.1 versus 4.0 days, and hospital charges were significantly higher in Frostbite patients, 43,400 versus 15,600 American dollars. So what does that mean? Frostbite especially considering the actual gravity behind the damage and how deep that damage goes immediately when we are considering the two different conditions, does cost significantly more. It is also actually very interesting to see that the 15,600 is so close to the burn cost analysis from the other study, which they were two separate studies. But once again, looking at frostbite damage, not even full on freezing, but frostbite was nearly 3 entire times the amount more in terms of cost than a burn. Paralysis is also an incredibly strange one to actually consider, considering that its real life effect and cost can be incredibly varied. But we're going to try anyway. The paralysis condition reduces the Pokemon's speed stat and causes it to have a 25% chance of being unable to use a move, quote-unquote fully paralyzed as per the text it says, when trying to use one. From Generation 1 to 6, its speed is reduced by 25% of its normal value. From Generation 7 onward, a Pokemon's speed is reduced to 50% of its normal value. Pokemon with the Quick Feet ability instead have their speed increased by 50% while paralyzed. In Generation 5, Pokemon glow yellow while afflicted with paralysis, and their animation will be slowed significantly. And that can be said about a lot of our other conditions in terms of, in Generation 5, they're red. If they're poisoned, they're purple. And I'm pretty sure if they're frozen, they're blue. Simple. Many moves that cause paralysis are electric type moves, and paralysis is the main effect of the move Thunder Wave. It can also be caused by static, effect spore, or gulp missile. Now, we have a couple of different methods in which paralysis can occur, but we can go as far as to look at the move Body Slam, which, I'm sorry, I'm gonna bet my bottom dollar that when you have a Wailord, I don't even think it can learn Body Slam, but bear with me, a Wailord literally body slamming any Pokemon, if they somehow don't die, we are breaking spines with that move. That is why we have the paralysis effect afterwards. In terms of direct cost for spinal cord injury, it can range between $290 to $612,590. And again, that is entirely dependent on how it occurs and the level of damage. We can suspect that many of our other forms of paralysis occurs through some sort of nerve damage, nerve blocking, or whatever else our minds would like to imagine. This one is incredibly varied, but nevertheless, it can be incredibly expensive. Poison is also going to be incredibly varied, but since Pokemon do have some overwhelmingly powerful poisons, we're going to take the worst case scenario for our analysis. The poison condition inflicts damage every turn. In Generation 1, poison inflicts damage equal to 1/16 of its maximum HP every turn. From Generation 2 onward, it inflicts damage equal to 1/8 of maximum HP. The Pokemon with the Poison Heal ability will restore an equivalent amount of HP instead of taking damage. Slurp up that nasty sludge. The bad poison condition inflicts damage every turn, with the amount of damage increasing each turn. Your toxic caused poisons. You're badly poisoned. It initially inflicts damage equal to 1/16 of the Pokemon's max HP, with the damage inflicted increasing by 1/16 every turn. 2/16 on the second, 3/16 on the third, so on and so forth. In Generation 5, Pokemon, again, glow purple with it. And they also get marked by a darker status flag in the battle if they are afflicted with the bad poison effect and within their Pokemon summary. So in this case, we're actually going to take a story from what happened to a toddler bitten by a rattlesnake, sourced from Washington Post. A few days after his second birthday, Brigland Pfeffer was playing with his siblings in their San Diego backyard. His mother, Lindsay Pfeffer, was a few feet away when Brigland made a noise and came running from the stone fire pit, holding his hand. She noticed a pinprick of blood between his thumb and forefinger when her older son called out, "Snake." "I saw a small rattlesnake coiled up by the fire pit," she said. Pfeffer called 911 that day in April and had an ambulance rush Brigland to Palomar Medical Center, Escondido. Antivenom, an antibody therapy that disables certain toxins, is usually administered from an intravenous line directly into the bloodstream, but emergency room staffers struggle to insert the IV. After many tries, they finally used a procedure that delivers medicine into the bone marrow, giving Wriglin a starting dose of the anti-venom Anavev. Okay, when I was younger, I did have to get, like, shots and everything like that, and they could not find where my veins were, and I remember just getting poked so many times. I have a little bit of a fear of hospitals because of that little bit of trauma from when I was younger. I mean, they held me down, and they were poking me a lot in, like, right here. It was terrible, and I bruised easily, so it did not look good afterwards. But back to our story. The swelling that had spread to his armpit slowly decreased. A couple of days later, he left the hospital with his grateful parents. Then the bills came. The final bill, it was $297,461, which included 2 ambulance rides, an emergency room visit, and a couple of days in pediatric intensive care. Antivenom alone accounts for $213,278.80 of the total bill. And while trying to do some research, that cost seems to be relatively equal across the board. There was a lot of questions regarding this whole scenario as to the cost of medical, and it got nasty. I'm just happy, and I know the family was happy based on the information, that the kid is good. The kid is looking, like, fantastic. They're alive. They're looking good. They're not poisoned by poison anymore. Like, great. It's just really unfortunate about the cost of it all, and a lot of people outside of that family was questioning it, of course. But we're not here about that. We're here to basically say Pokemon poison is probably going to be a heck of a lot worse than a simple rattlesnake bite. I mean, wow. That's going to be rough. You'll be lucky if you get, or your Pokemon get infected by poison. You'll be lucky if they make it out, which explains why every step you take within the Pokemon world ends up causing more damage to your Pokemon. Also, circulation of blood, transferring the toxins from the venom all over the body faster, so on and so forth. It makes sense. Up next is a sleep condition, which causes a Pokemon to be unable to use moves except Snore and Sleep Talk. From Generation 5 onward, Pokemon close their eyes while sleeping and move more slowly, unless you're Flamigo, which I don't think I've ever seen close its eyes ever. It blinks, but it does not blink while it's asleep. Sleep lasts for a randomly chosen duration of 1 to 7 turns in the handheld Generation 1 games, 1 to 3 in Pokemon Stadium, 1 to 5 in Generations 2 to 4, except the Japanese versions of Diamond and Pearl, and 1 to 3 turns in Generation 5 onwards. In the Japanese versions of Diamond and Pearl, the minimum and maximum sleep count is 1 turn higher, lasting 2 to 6 turns. If a Pokemon puts itself to sleep using rest, it will sleep for exactly 2 turns. And at least with the sleep condition, you don't have to, do anything but just wait for your Pokemon to wake up. Even if that wasn't the case, and your Pokemon was stuck asleep, there is no real treatment for this sort of thing in real life. It only becomes a problem if you've been asleep for long periods of time, reaching into days, weeks, and so on, kind of that coma area. In which case, you don't treat the condition, you treat the symptoms and the problems that may occur. Gotta make sure you don't get bed sores, baby. So, the cost would be, theoretically, 0 or theoretically infinite. But, we're gonna say it's probably more on the 0 side, as long as your Pokemon wakes up in the middle of battle, I suppose. So now, we have the question. Where is all of this money coming from? We have confirmation that our champion, Elite Four, and even gym leaders are being paid through the Pokemon League regarding their salaries within their positions. One of those pieces of confirmation that we have is actually because of Larry in the Generation 9 Scarlet and Violet games. He flat out says that he's on salary and that he has to get work done. Alternatively, they do also mention it in the Pokemon Adventures manga, where we do see, again, that directly stated that the Pokemon League, funds a lot of these just gym challenges, the gym leaders, everybody. In addition, we could go through every gym leader and break down what their major service or export is that they provide to their region to find out just how much money they might be making, which actually would be a pretty fun video to do. But Despite knowing all of this information, we somehow still have no idea how the Pokemon centers are being funded for their medical services, let alone all the additional services that they are providing. Now, we could suspect that the Poke Centers are saving us when we black out after losing a battle, but that isn't and never was the case. So at least we're not paying big ol' ambulance fees just to get to the Poke Center. In fact, the base payout is dependent upon how many badges you have and the level of your Pokemon in the modern games. You either drop your money because it was a wild Pokemon and you scurry back to a Poke Center, or you just pay out your lost money and then go back to a Poke Center. Our money lost is equivalent to your level multiplied by your base payout. For example, if the player has 7 badges and loses a battle with only a level 96 Venusaur, in their party, $9,600 will be lost. The minimum amount of money that the player can lose is $8 if the Pokemon with the highest level in the player's party is level 1 and the player has 0 badges. 1 times 8 equals 8. There are charts for it. And while the maximum would then be 12,000 if a Pokemon with the highest level in the player's party is level 100 and the player has 8 badges, or the Island Challenge Completion Stamp, which, again, 100 times 120, 12,000. If the player is currently holding less money than the amount calculated, they just simply lose all their money and they black out. So, once again, we can cross off the idea that Poke Centers are sending out ambulances to us or are mugging us after we black out, just reaching into our wallet, taking their cut, and then carrying us back to the Poke Center. An alternative idea is actually much simpler, even though it hasn't been confirmed, and that is if we look at where Poke Centers are located, they're usually within the cities or near them, and with the exception to the one or potential of community service center Poke Centers, they are possibly dependent upon the gym leaders of that city, especially as we do see a Poke Center within the entrance to the Elite Four. So let's look back at the one and only place that charges for you to heal your Pokemon as a sort of example to try and confirm all of this, and that is Potown, the Team Skull hideout. As the Pokemon Center, like the rest of Potown, is occupied by Team Skull, represent best team in all of Pokemon, in my personal opinion. Not the scariest or most effective, just the best. No operational Pokemon, Pokemon Center Cafe, or PC can be found within that Pokemon Center. A Team Skull Grunt will, however, offer to heal the player's Pokemon for $10 whenever she's asked to. After the player has become champion, the Grunt, along with her cohort, will offer to sell them a Skull Tank and Team Skull Cap. If the player purchases the clothing, the 2 Grunts will leave the Pokemon Center, leaving it with no more functional use. They just abandon the post like, yeah, this isn't our problem anymore. Anywho, we got the money we wanted. Have fun not being able to heal your Pokemon whatsoever. It's so dumb, but I honestly love it. And it actually applies a couple of different things. One, it does take some level of technical skill and understanding of the machines more than just, ooh, I pressed a funny button and now it works. No, you can't just place your Pokeballs in and slap the button of the machine. There might be more to it. 2, this also implies that there is a potential legitimate cost through service at the very least. We know it does take power, which could be another cost to offset, and then the actual service of healing itself, even if it's just the machine at times. And finally, this also implies that our pink-haired Team Skull Grunt member operating the healing machine, as many of our other pink-haired individuals do, could have been training to become a Nurse Joy or general Pokemon Center attendee, as you would expect of normal Poke Centers. This would make sense considering she already knows how to make it work. So, yeah, all of that just to kind of relatively prove that there is a true cost of these centers and that it has to be paid, most likely being paid by these gym leaders, considering that Potown didn't have a gym leader anymore. I mean, obviously, yes, it's a Lola, so they didn't have a gym leader at all, but they weren't letting the Kahunas in or anybody else in. Nobody was allowed to just walk in unless you were fighting Team Skull, in which case they were funding themselves and the Poke Center instead of them being funded by the, again, kahunas or trial captains, or the Pokemon League that was being established within Alola. This again likely means that any gym leader's city or export or service has funds allocated towards the Pokemon centers to ensure that budding trainers would have no cost applied to them for properly caring for their Pokemon. And I guess if we look at Paldea for that matter, considering a lot of Paldea is built on the idea of nurturing young trainers to find their treasure, the reason why we'd have a lot of Poke Centers all over the place is because the Academy actually is funding a lot of those, placing them there. And a lot of those gym leaders of that region are in very good talks with each other. They know how to communicate, and it's actually amazing to see. And I talked all about which region is the best region to live in, looking at a number of different factors that we have to consider in my previous video. So go check that out after this one. It's really fun. And also another not super long one. It also kind of makes sense considering the fact that, I mean, gym leaders are encouraging you to fight them with your Pokemon. So it'd be kind of a jerk move to be like, yeah, you gotta fight me. Your Pokemon are probably gonna faint. And if you don't get the badge because you lost, you don't get your Pokemon healed, which means they probably die. You don't get to be a Pokemon trainer. Goodbye. We have a monetary, you have to subscribe to become a Pokemon trainer. It is a pay to win process then. Luckily it's not. And we can at least suspect as to where the source of the money is coming from. One thing I actually just remembered that I did not mention before, there are very, very, very few instances of human doctors within the Pokemon world. There are only two that I can think of right off the bat. One of them was the womanizer from the Pokemon anime that was too afraid to actually work on Pokemon. He was an amazing doctor, but he flirted with every woman that came across his path. Heavy womanizer. But as the episode went through, he eventually gave it a shot, saved a Pokemon, and decided that he would work on both humans and Pokemon, which is really weird when you think about it, because it's like saying, oh, I went to the doctor today. Oh, my dog went to the doctor today. Oh, what time did you take them? That sounds like a busy day. Oh, we went at the same time. Where? To the vet doctor clinic, human doctor clinic? Oh. The only other doctor I can think of is actually Miriam, which I did have to look up because I could not remember her name. All I remember is ever so slightly simping for her. I don't blame anyone for it. I might fear hospitals ever so slightly and nurses, but at the same time, for the life of me, I didn't do any of her side quests or anything like that within the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games, which found out her name is in Japanese directly translated to Mimosa, you know, like the drink, which is really funny. But that is, or she is really the only other person. According to model Nyara at South Paldean Sea, she and Miriam used to work at a Pokemon Center, though they have since drifted apart. After some time, Miriam became a nurse of Naranja Academy and Uva Academy after failing to qualify as a health instructor. After the player, I'm stumbling on my words and I'm sorry, started their treasure hunt and relayed their experiences to Miriam, she gradually became inspired to attempt the certification test again, and this time managed to get herself a teacher's job for the next school year. Miriam later participated in the Academy Ace tournaments. What's also very interesting is that Miriam does have a slew of Pokemon related to real-life practices. All of Miriam's Pokemon may allude to specific types of medicine and healing. Hypno may allude to hypnotherapy and sleeping well. Pincurchin may allude to acupuncture and possibly shock therapy. Saucebuck and Meganium may allude to aromatherapy and medicinal herbs. Glalie may allude to cryotherapy and possibly cold compresses such as an ice pack. Electros, Electros kind of covering all the water Pokemon or the Pokemon live in the oceans kind of did something to my brain. Anywho, Electros may allude to either defibrillation or leeching, and Toxapex may allude to acupuncture once again, as well as the use of venom in medicine. This can be further supported by Hypno's Ultramoon Pokédex entries mentioning how the Pokemon is sometimes used in hospitals to assist doctors with patients that are unable to sleep at night, relating to Miriam's profession in the medical field as a nurse. With Sawsbuck and Meganium's possible relations to the idea of aromatherapy, there is a move, of course, by the same name, which cures the user, all Pokemon in the party, and all allies of any status conditions, relating back to the medical theme of Miriam's party once again. And fittingly, prior to Generation 9, this move could be learned by both Sawsbuck and Meganium. And only because I know it's going to happen in the comments, simple way. Simple way. There are some fantastic Pokemon, I don't want to say gym leaders necessarily, but there are some fantastic just designs that everyone has been simping for since Pokemon Legends Arceus has revealed just like, oh yeah, we can make them hot. And we will. Again and again. And I don't blame anybody simping, just simp respectfully. Now, as we move back, you might be making a counter argument to all of this. And that would simply be, as I would predict, what about Viridian City's gym? Giovanni abandoned it, so how is that Pokemon Center being funded? Well, there's a simple explanation for that. If we look back at what I was talking about earlier, the idea that gym leaders have major exports or services that they provide to the region, then the Pokemon Center is still being funded by Giovanni. After all, after Giovanni is defeated in the original games, he goes to his hideouts where nobody knows where it is. Until we find out his hideout is actually secretly the Viridian City gym. And it would make sense that he'd want to keep that gym up and running even if he's not there anymore. All the while acting from the shadows where nobody would have even known that he was both the 8th gym leader and the leader of Team Rocket. Even if he doesn't fund it directly anymore, he is a ground type gym leader. Ground type and rock type gym leaders are typically associated with what? Mines, minerals, digging those mines in general, and pulling out valuables from the earth and allowing that to be their export. Giovanni literally calls his team the Gems of Viridian City, and would likely have gotten his fortune separate from Madame Boss, his mother and original owner / leader of Team Rocket, through mining and excavating gems within the Pokemon world, allowing him to allocate his funds towards himself, Team Rocket, and his cover of Viridian City without their knowing. This man had some almost literal blood diamonds going on here. So now we are on to the final portion of this video, what I would consider the possible terror of the Pokemon world. Because while we were able to analyze the supposed costs of Poke Centers, there is one thing that cannot be healed by a Pokemon Center. It is a virus, bacteria, living microorganisms that cannot be removed from Pokemon unless they go away on their own. A virus that the Pokemon world knows little to nothing about, called Pokerus. Pokemon virus is a microscopic life form that may attach to Pokemon, first appearing in the Generation 2 games. It is a beneficial mechanic that a Pokemon can obtain. When a Pokemon has the Pokerus, it gains double the effort values from battling. For example, fighting a Magikarp will give 2 speed EVs rather than 1. Effort points gained from vitamins and feathers are not doubled though. The infected Pokemon can infect other Pokemon with the virus for a period of 1 to 4 days. However, the Pokerus timer can be delayed by several methods, such as by placing the infected Pokemon in a PC box. Sorry honey, I need you to stay sick longer. Goodbye. While it is represented similarly to status conditions, the Pokerus is not a status condition. I keep switching back and forth, I apologize. So, it cannot be healed at a Pokemon Center or with any status condition healing item. Pokerus has a 3 in 65,536, or approximately 1 in 21,845 chance of being generated on one of the player's Pokemon after a battle, making it rarer than encountering or hatching a shiny Pokemon. If any of the player's Pokemon are infected, the Pokerus may spread among Pokemon in the player's party after any battle. In other words, if your Pokemon are out of their Pokeball and roaming around interacting with each other or other Pokemon, the virus spreads. From Generation 4 onward, the Pokerus became more accessible with worldwide trading facilitated by Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. In other words, this stuff is worldwide. It is a worldwide. I don't even know if YouTube would let me say some of those words when it comes to it. But either way, it's a Pokerus that is spread throughout the world. Fantastic. Infection. When a Pokemon is infected with the Pokerus, their status screen will display an icon indicating this special status, the same way status conditions would be noted. If the Pokemon becomes affected by a status condition such as sleep, the Pokerus icon will be temporarily replaced until the status condition is cured. As long as the Pokemon is infected with the Pokerus, it can spread the virus to other Pokemon in the player's party. The Pokerus may spread if an infected Pokemon is in the player's party after a battle. The Pokerus may only spread to a Pokemon directly adjacent to an already infected Pokemon, and only if they have never had Pokerus before. Eggs may hatch the Pokerus like any other Pokemon. A Pokerus infection only progresses towards cured status when a new day starts with the infected Pokemon in the party, or if the game is loaded, it is not the same day as it was when the game was saved. The number of days before a Pokemon will be cured of the Pokerus can vary from 1 to 4 days, a short infection period. Once this time is passed, the Pokemon becomes cured and will be immune to the virus in the future. The Pokemon still gains double effort values even though it is cured though. We'll talk about that later, because it also makes its appearance in the anime and the manga. In Oaknapped, Dr. Namba explains to Professor Oak that the mysterious viral life form, Pokerus, is an important component of his Pokemon Power Acceleration Project, a secret project that aims to infect Pokemon with the Pokerus to evolve them at a faster rate. However, all of his specimens had died out, almost like experiments, which I'm not wrong. Professor Oak also explains that the term Pokerus was coined by combining the words Pokemon and virus together. Later, Professor Oak began researching about the Pokerus and Team Rocket's true intentions of using it, which was never directly revealed or picked up ever again. I will note that what's very interesting is that Team Rocket very often does cause Pokemon to evolve before they are ready. You are probably most commonly associated or aware of the Red Gyarados event at the Lake of Rage, in which case, yes, that was done. In which case, no, that actually specifically was not done with Pokerus, that was through sound radio waves. No, in the manga though, we do see an example in which a Rhyhorn is injected with something and then evolves into Rhydon, which is a very just violent evolution compared to every other evolution that we see within the manga. So we know that it is causing some level of pain when this happens. The Pokerus was featured as well in the final Dimensional Duel 9, when Platinum's team was discovered to have this virus and, as a result, became stronger. Her Frostlass, Pachirisu, and Cherim had it prior to being taken from the hospital, and it subsequently spread to the rest of her party. At the hospital, Daisy Oak and Yanace Berlitz realized that the infection was, in fact, the Pokerus. And all of this can also just simply be summarized or described as to what Elm says in Generation 4. Apparently, there's something called Pokerus that infects Pokemon. Yes, it's like a virus, so it's called Pokerus. It multiplies fast and infects other Pokemon too, but that's all. It doesn't seem to do anything, and it goes away over time. I guess it's nothing to worry about. Bye. When anybody else comments on the Pokerus, it's almost always this dismissive tone to it. The idea of, we can't do anything to it. Or, oh, they are microscopic organisms living on your Pokemon. But then they just suddenly go away. What makes this even more incredibly interesting is that even within our own bodies, we have dormant viruses that are currently not doing anything at all. These viruses could theoretically activate at any moment on their own or be activated by other viruses, disease, illness, or unknown factors. and you would never know you have them until they activate or extensive testing is completed. What I would also like to consider here is that Pokerus is not necessarily a virus, but is the Pokemon world's equivalent of super bacteria that are immune to modern medicine, such as antibiotics. They just simply become stronger and stronger, more immune to our treatments, more immune to our antibiotics that we use, especially if we overtreat, until eventually they have adapted to the point where they cannot be killed by any of our usual treatment methods. There is the possibility that Pokerus, considering that again, it is a living organism despite being called a Pokemon virus, is one of these super bacteria. And yes, I will say viruses are not living creatures by all means, so you might be asking, what does this all mean? It means that the Pokemon world is incredibly lucky that Pokerus is a mutualistic virus, providing the host and the virus with a benefit. It also affects the Pokemon after infection, meaning that it is likely even messing with the genetic DNA of the Pokemon, as after infection, they continue to grow at a rapid rate, twice as fast as your normal Pokemon. The problem with this, though, is that Pokerus could turn on us at any second. It's basically the same as when we think of bacteria within our bodies when we get something like, let's say, strep throat. You have bacteria in your body at all times. Sorry if I freak anybody out, but they're there, and they are communal. They're kind of kept within, like, a set standard of, oh, if I don't overstep my boundaries, I get to live, and I get to exist as a small culture. And so all the bacteria typically does that, and it keeps you healthy by having the right balance. Let's say you get strep throat. Let's say you get a cough, and you start coughing too much. You start to rip the mucosal lining within your throat, which then opens up the opportunity for these bacteria to go further, to reach beyond, and then you kind of end up with different infections, such as strep throat, if I remember correctly, actually. All it takes is for the opportunity. Every living creature on the planet will always try to choose survival and expansion of its own species through their natural instinct. And who's to say that Pokerus is not the same? If that day were to ever come, and the Pokerus were to mutate, it is already something that can't be healed by Pokecenters. It is worldwide and spreads incredibly fast. This is our hidden cost of the Pokecenter. A super virus that could potentially wipe out everything. So with that, what do you think? Do you think Pokerus can actually become a massive threat? Do you think it'll probably never be truly touched upon within the Pokemon world, but it is a very fun theory all in all, while the rest of this video, hopefully, was a very fun, insightful, in-depth analysis about Pokemon centers and the weird idea that they're never directly stated to be funded from anything. So, tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and I usually read them, no matter how long they are, even if I don't necessarily react to them. So, type your little hearts out and share this video with others. It means the world. So, with that, again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of the members that you are seeing on screen. If you enjoyed, once again, please become a subscriber, share this with others, comment below, and even go as far as becoming a member for $3 a month. I create a lot of content, and I would love to continue to do so. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!